The crystal chandelier above the marble lobby cast dancing shadows as smoke began seeping through the air vents on the 42nd floor of the Burj Al Noor Hotel. What had started as whispered threats in Arabic between two maintenance workers was about to become a deadly trap for one of Dubai's most powerful men. Nur Khalil clutched the translation documents against her chest as she watched Emir Rashid storm past the concierge desk. His jaw was set in a hard line, his expensive suit wrinkled from a day of failed negotiations. The billionaire developer had just cancelled a $2 billion contract, and his fury was visible to everyone in the opulent lobby. As an interpreter for the hotel's international guests, Nur had seen many wealthy men lose their temper. But something about the way Rashid moved, quick, decisive, dangerous, made her step back into the shadow of a marble pillar. She had been preparing documents for tomorrow's conference when she heard the heated phone call that ended with Rashid slamming his device onto the mahogany table. "The deal is dead," he had announced to his assistant in English, his voice carrying across the lobby. "We leave Dubai tonight." Nur should have minded her own business. Should have focused on her translation work and gone home to her small apartment where her grandmother waited with endless stories and mint tea. Instead, she found herself following at a distance as Rashid strode toward the elevator bank. That's when she heard them. Two men in maintenance uniforms stood near the service elevator, speaking in rapid Arabic. They thought no one could understand them in the international hotel where English dominated every conversation. But Nur's Lebanese grandmother had made sure she was fluent in both languages. "The fire will start in 10 minutes, the taller man said, checking his watch. "Make sure the alarms on his floor are disabled." "What about the sprinkler system?" his companion asked nervously. "Already handled. The entire 42nd floor will be cut off. He'll be trapped in his suite with no way out." Nur's blood turned to ice. She pressed herself against the pillar, her heart hammering so loud she was sure they would hear it. The men were talking about Rashid's penthouse suite. Everyone knew the billionaire always stayed in the same room when he visited Dubai. "Hassan will pay us well for this," the first man continued. "Rashid thinks he can destroy our boss's business and walk away. Tonight he learns otherwise." The maintenance workers separated, one heading toward the service stairs while the other disappeared into a utility room. Nur stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. She could pretend she hadn't heard anything. Could go home and read about it in tomorrow's news. Could let fate decide what happened to a man she barely knew. But the image of smoke filling a penthouse suite, of someone trapped 42 floors above the ground with no escape, made her stomach turn. She thought of her grandmother's stories about their family fleeing Lebanon during the war, about the kindness of strangers who risked everything to help. Nur ran toward the elevators. Rashid was already inside a private elevator, his finger hovering over the button for the 42nd floor. The golden doors were sliding shut when Nur threw herself between them. "Wait," she gasped, her chest heaving. "Please, you have to listen to me." Rashid's dark eyes narrowed as he took in her hotel interpreter badge and flushed face. "I don't have time for hotel surveys or upgrades," he said coldly in English. "Whatever you're selling, I'm not interested." The elevator began to rise, carrying them both toward the upper floors. Nur knew she had seconds before they reached his penthouse. She switched to Arabic, her voice urgent and clear. "They've set your room on fire," she said in perfect Arabic, watching his expression change from irritation to shock. "Two men in maintenance uniforms. They disabled the alarms on your floor. You'll be trapped if you go to your suite." Rashid hit the emergency stop button so hard the elevator shuddered. The lights flickered as they came to a halt between floors. He stared at Nur with intense focus as if seeing her for the first time. "Repeat that," he commanded in Arabic. "Hassan ordered them to kill you," Nur said, her voice steadier now. "They're going to trap you in your suite and let the fire spread. The sprinklers are disabled. The alarms won't work." "How do you know this?" "I heard them talking in Arabic. They thought no one would understand." Rashid studied her face for a long moment, then pulled out his phone. He spoke rapidly to someone on the other end, issuing orders in Arabic about security sweeps and evacuation protocols. While he talked, Nur noticed the faint smell of smoke beginning to filter through the elevator's ventilation system. "We need to get out of here," she said urgently. "The fire has already started." Rashid ended his call and immediately pressed the button for the service level. "My security team is checking the penthouse now," he said grimly. "If you're right about this." The elevator doors opened onto a service corridor Nur had never seen before. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows on concrete walls as they hurried toward an exit stairwell. Behind them, they could hear the building's fire alarms finally beginning to sound, but only on the lower floors. "This way," Rashid said, taking her hand as they entered the stairwell. His palm was warm and steady against hers, an anchor point in the chaos. My driver is waiting in the garage. They descended quickly, their footsteps echoing in the enclosed space. Above them, Noor could see orange light beginning to flicker in the stairwell windows. The fire was spreading faster than anyone had expected. Why did you warn me? Rashid asked as they reached the garage level. You don't even know me. Noor looked back once at the smoke now visible in the stairwell above them. Because it was the right thing to do, she said simply. They emerged into the underground garage where Rashid's driver waited beside a black Mercedes. The man's eyes widened when he saw them coming from the service stairs instead of the main elevator. Sir, the building's security called. There's a fire on the 42nd floor, the driver reported. They're saying it started in your suite. Rashid helped Noor into the back seat, then slid in beside her. As the car pulled away from the hotel, they could see fire trucks arriving and guests evacuating through the main entrance. The penthouse windows glowed orange against the Dubai skyline. You saved my life tonight, Rashid said quietly, his dark eyes serious in the dim light of the car. In my culture, that creates a debt that can never be fully repaid. Noor shook her head, suddenly exhausted by the adrenaline crash. You don't owe me anything. I just did what anyone would do. No, Rashid said firmly. What you did tonight was extraordinary. You risked your safety to warn a stranger. You could have been killed if Hassan's men had seen you. The car turned onto Sheikh Zayed Road, putting distance between them and the burning hotel. Noor watched the city lights blur past the window, reality finally setting in. She had just helped one of the richest men in Dubai escape an assassination attempt. Her quiet life as a hotel interpreter was about to become much more complicated. I'll make sure you're safe, Rashid continued. Hassan al-Maktoum is dangerous, but he's also predictable. Once he realizes his plan failed, he'll look for someone to blame. You think he'll come after me? I think he'll come after anyone who helped me tonight. Which is why you're not going back to your apartment. Noor started to protest, but Rashid raised a hand. This isn't a request, he said gently but firmly. You saved my life. Now let me save yours. As the Mercedes sped through the neon-lit streets of Dubai, Noor realized her life had just taken an irreversible turn. She thought of her grandmother waiting at home, of her job at the hotel, of the simple routine that had defined her existence for the past 2 years. All of that was over now. The moment she had thrown herself between those elevator doors, she had stepped into a world of wealth and danger that she barely understood. But as she glanced at Rashid's profile in the passing streetlights, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt alive. The car pulled through the gates of a private compound on the outskirts of the city. Palm trees lined the driveway leading to a modern villa that gleamed white against the desert landscape. Security guards nodded respectfully as they passed, their eyes alert and professional. Welcome to my home, Rashid said as the car stopped in front of the main entrance. You'll be safe here while we figure out what to do next. Noor looked up at the impressive building, its windows glowing with warm light. Somewhere in the distance, she could still see the orange glow on the horizon where the Burj Al Noor Hotel continued to burn. She had saved a billionaire's life tonight. Tomorrow she would have to face the consequences of that choice. But as Rashid offered her his hand to help her from the car, Noor made a decision that would change everything. She took it. The morning sun painted the desert compound in shades of gold and amber as Noor woke in a bedroom larger than her entire apartment. Egyptian cotton sheets, a view of pristine gardens, and the soft hum of central air conditioning reminded her that the previous night hadn't been a dream. She had really saved Amir Rashid's life, and now she was a guest in his private estate. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Miss Khalil? A woman's voice called in accented English. Mr. Rashid requests your presence for breakfast. Noor found clothes laid out for her, a simple but elegant blue dress that fit perfectly, along with modest heels and a light cardigan. Someone had clearly estimated her size with remarkable accuracy. She dressed quickly and followed a housekeeper through marble corridors lined with contemporary art and floor-to-ceiling windows. The breakfast terrace overlooked a swimming pool that seemed to stretch endlessly toward the desert horizon. Rashid sat at a glass table, already dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke rapidly in Arabic. When he saw Noor approach, he ended the call immediately and stood. Good morning, he said, pulling out a chair for her. I hope you slept well despite everything. Thank you for your hospitality, Noor replied, accepting the seat gratefully. But I should really get back to my grandmother. She'll be worried sick. Rashid poured coffee from a silver pot, the rich aroma mixing with the scent of jasmine from the gardens. "I've already sent someone to check on her," he said gently. "Your grandmother is safe and she's been told you're helping with an important business matter." "You went to my apartment?" "My security team did a sweep of the building this morning. Hassan's men were watching it." Rashid's expression darkened. "They would have taken you the moment you returned home." Noor felt a chill despite the warm morning air. The reality of her situation was beginning to sink, and she wasn't just a guest here, she was under protection. "How long do you think this will last?" "That depends on several factors," Rashid said, taking a seat across from her. "Hassan al-Maktoum is many things, but he's not stupid. He knows his assassination attempt failed, which means he's already planning his next move." A housekeeper appeared with a tray of fresh fruit, pastries, and traditional Arabic breakfast items. Noor's stomach growled despite her anxiety. She had barely eaten the day before. As she reached for a piece of bread, Rashid continued. "I've been thinking about our conversation last night," he said. "About debts and obligations. In my family we have a saying, a life saved is a soul bound. It means that when someone saves your life, you become responsible for their well-being." "That's very poetic," Noor said carefully, "but I don't expect anything from you. Which is exactly why you deserve everything I can offer." Rashid leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "Tell me about your life, Noor. What do you need? What do you want?" "I just want to go back to my normal life," she said honestly. "My job at the hotel, taking care of my grandmother, saving money for her medical treatments." "What kind of medical treatments?" Noor hesitated, then decided there was no point in hiding anything now. "She has diabetes and heart problems. The medications are expensive, and the doctors say she needs surgery soon. I've been working extra shifts to save enough money." Rashid pulled out his phone and made a note. "What's her doctor's name?" "Why?" "Because your grandmother will have the best cardiac surgeon in the world by next week, and you'll never have to worry about medical bills again." "I can't accept that," Noor said quickly. "It's too much. It's not nearly enough." Rashid set down his phone and looked at her seriously. "Noor, do you understand what Hassan al-Maktoum intended to do last night? He didn't just want to kill me, he wanted to make sure I suffered first. That fire would have burned slowly, trapping me in my suite while I realized there was no escape." The image made Noor shudder. She had heard the cruelty in the maintenance workers' voices, the satisfaction they took in planning Rashid's death. "You didn't just save my life," Rashid continued. "You saved me from a horrible death. That kind of courage deserves to be rewarded, not dismissed." "But I don't want to be bought," Noor said firmly. "I helped you because it was right, not because I expected payment. And that's exactly why you deserve my help." Rashid smiled for the first time since she'd met him, transforming his serious features into something warm and approachable. "I'm not trying to buy you, Noor. I'm trying to honor you." A security guard appeared at the edge of the terrace, speaking quietly to Rashid in Arabic. Noor caught enough of the conversation to understand that Hassan's men had been arrested at her apartment building, and that the hotel fire investigation was revealing evidence of arson. "Good," Rashid said when the guard left. "The authorities are building a case against Hassan. But it will take time, and he has resources to fight back." "What does that mean for me?" "It means you're going to be staying here longer than planned. And it means I have a proposition for you." Noor raised an eyebrow. "What kind of proposition?" "I need a personal interpreter," Rashid said. "Someone I can trust completely. Most of my business dealings involve multiple languages, and I've learned that using outside translators can be problematic. They sometimes have divided loyalties." "You want me to work for you?" "I want you to work with me," Rashid corrected. "As an equal partner in my business ventures. Your linguistic skills could be invaluable in negotiations, and your discretion would be worth more than any salary I could offer." Noor considered this carefully. Working for Rashid would certainly solve her financial problems, but it would also tie her to his dangerous world permanently. "What about my grandmother?" "She would be moved to the best assisted living facility in Dubai, with round-the-clock medical care and any treatments she needs. Or, if she prefers, I can have a medical team come to her." "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" "I've learned that success comes from taking care of the people who matter." Rashid reached across the table and touched her hand lightly. "You matter, Noor. What you did last night proved that you're someone special." The warmth of his fingers sent an unexpected jolt through her system. Noor looked into his dark eyes and saw something beyond gratitude, a genuine interest that made her pulse quicken. This was dangerous territory in more ways than one. "I'll need to think about it," she said, gently pulling her hand away. "Of course. Take all the time you need. Rashid stood and checked his watch. I have some calls to make, but please make yourself at home. The pool, the library, the gardens, everything here is at your disposal. As he walked away, Noor remained at the breakfast table, staring out at the desert landscape. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Your grandmother sends her love. She's proud of you for helping someone in need. Somehow, Rashid had managed to contact her grandmother and reassure her without revealing any dangerous details. The thoughtfulness of that gesture touched something deep in Noor's chest. She spent the morning exploring the compound, marveling at its blend of traditional Arabic architecture and modern luxury. The library contained books in at least 6 languages, including a section on Lebanese poetry that made her think of her grandmother's stories. The gardens were meticulously maintained oases of green in the desert setting. By afternoon she had made her decision. She found Rashid in his home office, a spacious room lined with windows overlooking the desert. He was reviewing documents with 2 other men who left discreetly when she knocked on the door. I'll accept your offer, Noor said without preamble. But I have conditions. Rashid gestured to a chair across from his desk. I'm listening. First, my grandmother stays in her own apartment with medical care brought to her. She's lived there for 15 years, it's her home. Agreed. Second, I want to maintain some independence. I'll work with you but I won't be your employee. We're partners, which means I have a say in the decisions that affect me. Also agreed. Third, when this situation with Hassan is resolved, I want the option to walk away if I choose to. Rashid was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. And if I don't want you to walk away? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that neither of them was ready to address directly. Noor felt heat rise in her cheeks but maintained eye contact. Then you'll have to convince me to stay, she said softly. Challenge accepted, Rashid replied, his smile returning. When do we start? Right now if you're ready. I assume you have business to conduct while we're waiting for Hassan to make his next move? Actually, I have a video conference with investors in London in an hour. They're considering funding a new development project, but they're concerned about the political stability in the region. What languages will we be dealing with? English primarily, but the lead investor is originally from Morocco. If we could communicate with him in Arabic during the private negotiations, it might give us an advantage. Noor nodded thoughtfully. Cultural context is just as important as language. Moroccan business culture has specific protocols around respect and relationship building. If we approach this correctly, you could secure not just this deal but his recommendation for future projects. Rashid leaned back in his chair, impressed. You see? This is exactly why I need you as a partner, not just a translator. As they prepared for the video conference, Noor felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She was stepping into a world far removed from her simple life as a hotel interpreter. But as she watched Rashid review his presentation materials, she realized something important. For the first time in years, she felt challenged and valued in ways that went beyond just earning money for her grandmother's care. Rashid saw her as intelligent and capable, not just helpful. It was a feeling she could get used to. The video conference went better than either of them had expected. Noor's cultural insights helped Rashid navigate sensitive topics about regional development, and her ability to switch seamlessly between languages impressed the international investors. By the end of the call, they had secured preliminary approval for a $50 million resort project. That was incredible, Rashid said as they ended the conference. You didn't just translate, you helped me understand what they really wanted to hear. Language is about connection, Noor replied. When people feel understood, they're more likely to trust you. Is that what happened with us last night? You understood something about me that made you want to help? The question caught Noor off guard. She thought about it seriously, remembering the moment she had decided to warn him about the fire. I think I saw someone who was in danger and needed help, she said finally. The rest of it, who you are, what you're worth, none of that mattered in that moment. And now? Does it matter now? Noor looked around the luxurious office, then back at Rashid's expectant face. I'm still figuring that out, she said honestly. Her phone buzzed with another message, this time from her grandmother. The nice doctor says my heart is strong enough for surgery next month. Thank your new employer for me. I'm proud of you, Habibti. Noor showed the message to Rashid, who smiled with satisfaction. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She is. She always told me that Allah puts people in our path for a reason. What do you think our reason is? The question hung between them as the sun set over the desert compound. Noor didn't have an answer yet, but she was beginning to suspect that their paths crossing was about much more than just business. As they prepared for dinner, Noor realized that accepting Rashid's offer had changed more than just her financial situation. It had opened the door to possibilities she had never imagined. The only question now was whether she was brave enough to walk through it. 3 days later, Noor stood beside Rashid in his private conference room as Dubai Police Detective Amara Hassan spread photographs across the mahogany table. The images showed the burned remains of the hotel penthouse, melted security cameras and evidence bags containing accelerant residue. The arson was professional, Detective Hassan explained in English, glancing between Rashid and Noor. Multiple ignition points, disabled safety systems, sophisticated timing devices. This wasn't random vandalism. Rashid studied the photographs with clinical interest. What about the maintenance workers Miss Khalil overheard? Both men have disappeared. Their employment records at the hotel were falsified, and the addresses they provided don't exist. The detective turned to Noor. Your testimony about their conversation is crucial evidence, but we need more to build a case against Hassan al-Maktoum. Noor shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Being a witness in a criminal investigation wasn't something she had ever imagined doing. What kind of more evidence? Financial records, communications, witnesses to the planning stages. Detective Hassan closed her folder. Hassan is smart enough to keep his hands clean on paper. We need someone on the inside of his organization. Absolutely not, Rashid said firmly before the detective could continue. If you're suggesting that, Noor. I'm not suggesting anything yet, the detective interrupted. But Hassan al-Maktoum has made multiple attempts on your life over the past 5 years, Mr. Rashid. Each time, we've been unable to prove his involvement. This is the first case where we have a credible witness. After the detective left, Rashid paced the length of his office while Noor organized the business documents they had been reviewing before the meeting. The London investors had approved the resort project, and today they were supposed to start planning the next phase. Instead, they were dealing with the reality that Hassan wasn't going to give up easily. You're thinking about something, Noor observed, watching Rashid's measured steps. What is it? Hassan's pattern, Rashid replied, stopping near the window that overlooked his gardens. Every time he's tried to eliminate me, he's gotten more elaborate. The first attempt was a simple car accident, failed brakes on a mountain road. Then poison in my food at a restaurant. Then a staged robbery at my office. And now arson with you trapped in a hotel suite. Each method has been more public, more dramatic. He's not just trying to kill me anymore, he's trying to make a statement. Noor joined him at the window, noting how the afternoon light cast shadows across his face. Over the past few days, she had learned to read his expressions. This wasn't just strategic thinking, this was personal pain. Tell me about your history with Hassan, she said gently. Rashid was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. We were partners once. Best friends, actually. We met at university in London and decided to go into business together when we returned to Dubai. What happened? Hassan's younger brother, Tariq, wanted to join our construction company. He was impulsive, reckless with money, but Hassan insisted we give him a chance. Rashid's jaw tightened. Tariq embezzled nearly $2 million from our clients' deposits. When we discovered it, Hassan begged me not to press charges. Noor could see where this was leading, and her heart ached for the impossible position Rashid must have been in. I agreed to handle it privately, Rashid continued. We would pay back the clients and Tariq would leave the company. No criminal charges, no public scandal. But Tariq panicked when he realized what he'd done. The night before we were supposed to meet with the clients, he got drunk and drove his car off a cliff on Jebel Hafit. Hassan blamed you for his brother's death. He blamed me for everything. For discovering the theft, for forcing Tariq out of the company, for not covering it up completely. In Hassan's mind, I killed his brother as surely as if I had pushed him off that cliff myself. The pain in Rashid's voice made Noor want to comfort him, but she wasn't sure how. They had developed an easy working relationship over the past few days, but the personal boundaries between them remained carefully maintained. That was 8 years ago, Rashid said. Hassan has spent every year since then trying to destroy my business and my reputation. When that didn't work, he started trying to destroy me. I'm sorry, Noor said softly. Losing a friend and gaining an enemy at the same time must have been devastating. Rashid turned from the window to look at her, surprise flickering in his dark eyes. Most people focus on the business impact or the danger to my safety. You're the first person to understand that the real loss was personal. Betrayal by someone you care about cuts deeper than any business setback, Noor replied. My grandmother taught me that the heart remembers friendship longer than the mind remembers profit. Your grandmother sounds like she has a lot of wisdom to share. She says it comes from living through enough mistakes to recognize patterns. Nur smiled. She also says that some people are put in our lives to teach us lessons, and others are put there to help us heal from those lessons. Which category do you think you fall into? The question caught Nur off guard. She looked into Rashid's eyes and felt the now familiar flutter of attraction that she had been trying to ignore. Working closely with him over the past few days had revealed layers of character that went far beyond his wealth and success. He was thoughtful with his staff, generous with his time when people needed help, and surprisingly funny during their long planning sessions. He also had a habit of bringing her tea without being asked and remembering small details about her preferences that made her feel genuinely cared for. I think, Nur said carefully, that some people fall into both categories. Before Rashid could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent message. He read it quickly, his expression shifting from warmth to concern. What is it? Nur asked. Hassan has made contact. He wants to meet with me tomorrow night. That doesn't sound safe. It's not, Rashid agreed. But it might be our chance to get the evidence Detective Hassan needs. Hassan is arrogant enough to believe he can manipulate any situation to his advantage. You're not seriously considering meeting with him alone? Of course not. I'll have security backup and the location will be public. Rashid hesitated. Actually, I was hoping you might consider coming with me. Nur stared at him. What? Hassan suggested I bring my new translator to the meeting. Apparently, he's heard about our business partnership through his network of contacts. He knows about me? He knows you exist, but not that you're the one who overheard his men planning the arson. As far as Hassan is concerned, you're just my latest employee. The implications made Nur's stomach turn. If he finds out I was at the hotel that night? He won't, Rashid said firmly. But your presence might make him overconfident. People often say more than they should when they think they're among allies. Nur considered this carefully. The logical part of her brain screamed that meeting Hassan al-Maktoum was dangerous and unnecessary. But another part of her, the part that had risked everything to warn Rashid about the fire, wanted to see this through to the end. Where does he want to meet? The Atlantis Hotel in the main restaurant. Public, crowded, plenty of witnesses. And plenty of escape routes if things go wrong, Nur added. Exactly. Rashid moved closer to her, his expression serious. Nur, I need you to know that I would never ask you to do this if I thought there was real danger. My security team will be positioned throughout the restaurant, and we'll have a predetermined signal if we need to leave quickly. What kind of signal? If I mention the weather, we leave immediately. No questions, no explanations. Nur nodded slowly. What do you think Hassan wants? Probably to gloat about the hotel fire, maybe to make threats about future attacks. Hassan has always been theatrical, he enjoys showing off his power. And you think he'll incriminate himself in the process? I think his ego is bigger than his caution, Rashid replied. Especially if he believes he has the upper hand. That evening, as Nur prepared for dinner with Rashid's household staff, she found herself thinking about the choice ahead of her. She could refuse to attend the meeting with Hassan and remain safely in the background of this investigation. Or she could step forward and actively help bring a dangerous man to justice. The choice reminded her of the moment in the hotel elevator when she had decided to warn Rashid about the fire. Both situations required her to act despite the risks, to choose courage over comfort. Her grandmother had always said that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was feeling the fear and choosing to do what was right anyway. As Nur looked out at the desert sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, she made her decision. Tomorrow night, she would face Hassan al-Maktoum and help end his campaign of terror against the man who had become so much more than just her employer. The man who was quickly becoming someone she couldn't imagine living without. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Detective Hassan called while Nur was reviewing contracts in Rashid's office, her coffee growing cold as she concentrated on the complex legal language. Hassan al-Maktoum has left Dubai, the detective announced over speakerphone. His private jet filed a flight plan for Switzerland last night. Rashid set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. He's running? It appears so. Our investigation into the hotel fire has uncovered more evidence than expected. Financial records show payments to the maintenance workers, along with purchases of accelerants and timing devices. Hassan's lawyers probably advised him to leave the country while he still could. Nur felt a wave of relief wash over her. Does this mean it's over? Not entirely, Detective Hassan replied. We'll continue building the case and work with international authorities to bring him back for trial. But the immediate threat to both of you has been significantly reduced. After the call ended, Noor and Rashid sat in contemplative silence. The constant tension of the past week had become so familiar that its absence felt strange. I should probably start looking for an apartment, Noor said finally, and figure out how to get back to some kind of normal life. Is that what you want? Rashid asked quietly. The question hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Over the past week, their professional partnership had evolved into something more complex. Shared meals, late-night planning sessions, and quiet conversations in the garden had created an intimacy that went far beyond business. I don't know what I want anymore, Noor admitted. A week ago, my biggest concern was saving enough money for my grandmother's medicine. Now I'm partners in a multi-million-dollar resort project and I've helped solve an arson case. And how does that feel? Terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Noor looked around the office that had become so familiar. I keep waiting for someone to tell me I don't belong here. Rashid stood and moved to the window, his usual spot when he was thinking deeply. Do you know what I thought the first time I saw you in that elevator? That I was crazy for throwing myself between closing doors? That you were the bravest person I'd ever met. He turned to face her. Most people would have pretended they didn't hear those men planning my death. They would have told themselves it wasn't their responsibility. Maybe I just have poor judgment, Noor said with a self-deprecating smile. No, you have extraordinary character. And over this past week, I've learned that bravery was just the beginning. The intensity in his voice made Noor's pulse quicken. She stood and walked to the bookshelves, needing distance to think clearly. Rashid, we should probably talk about what happens next. With the business partnership, I mean. Of course, he said, but she could hear the disappointment in his voice. The London investors want to meet in person next week. There's also interest from a hotel chain in Morocco, and several other projects in the planning stages. That's wonderful, Noor said, running her fingers along the spine of a book of Arabic poetry. You won't really need an interpreter for all of that though. Most international business is conducted in English now. I need you, Rashid said simply. Not just as a translator but as a partner who understands people and cultures in ways that I don't. This past week has shown me how much more effective I am when I have someone I trust working with me. Noor pulled the poetry book from the shelf and opened it randomly. The page displayed a verse by Mahmoud Darwish about homeland and belonging. She read it silently, thinking about how much her life had changed. My grandmother wants to meet you, she said suddenly. I would be honored to meet her. She's protective and very direct. She'll probably ask you about your intentions. What should I tell her? Noor closed the book and turned to face him. What are your intentions, Rashid? He moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Honestly, they started as gratitude and respect. But somewhere between translating your first business call and watching you reorganize my entire filing system, they became something much more complicated. Complicated how? I care about you, Noor. More than I should, given our professional relationship. More than is probably wise, considering how recently we met. The admission sent warmth spreading through Noor's chest. She had been fighting the same feelings, telling herself that attraction to her employer was unprofessional and potentially dangerous. I care about you too, she said softly. But I'm scared that mixing business with personal feelings will ruin both. What if we could find a way to balance them? How? Rashid reached out and gently touched her hand, the same gesture he had made on their first morning together. This time Noor didn't pull away. Slowly, he said. Honestly. With respect for what we've built professionally and curiosity about what we might build personally. Before Noor could respond, the office door opened and Rashid's assistant entered with a stack of documents. They stepped apart quickly, both suddenly conscious of how intimate their conversation had become. The contracts from the London meeting need your signatures, the assistant said, pretending not to notice the tension in the room. And Miss Khalil, your grandmother called. She'd like you to bring Mr. Rashid for dinner tonight if he's available. Noor and Rashid exchanged glances. Did she really say that? Noor asked. She was quite insistent. She said it was time she met the man who had been taking such good care of her granddaughter. After the assistant left, Noor sank into her chair with a groan. I'm so sorry. My grandmother doesn't understand professional boundaries. I'll call her and explain. I'd love to have dinner with your grandmother, Rashid interrupted. You would. Noor, if we're going to explore whatever this is between us, I want to do it properly. That means meeting the people who matter to you and being honest about my feelings. Even if she interrogates you about your net worth and marriage prospects? Rashid laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Especially then. I have a feeling your grandmother and I will understand each other perfectly. That evening, Noor led Rashid through the narrow streets of old Dubai to her grandmother's apartment building. The contrast between his luxurious compound and her neighborhood was stark. Cracked sidewalks, aging buildings, the sounds and smells of working-class life. Are you sure about this? Noor asked as they climbed the stairs to the third floor. It's not exactly what you're used to. Noor, I grew up in a house smaller than my current garage, Rashid said gently. Wealth doesn't erase memory. Her grandmother, Saida Khalil, answered the door wearing her best dress and a knowing smile. At 78, she was still a formidable woman with sharp eyes and an elegant bearing that spoke of better times in Lebanon. So you're the man who's been keeping my granddaughter out all hours, she said in accented English, looking Rashid up and down appraisingly. Tata. Noor protested, using the Arabic word for grandmother. I'm honored to meet you, Mrs. Khalil, Rashid replied in perfect Arabic, offering a slight bow of respect. Your granddaughter speaks of you constantly. Saida's eyebrows rose in surprise and approval. You speak our language well for a businessman. Come in, both of you. Dinner is ready. The small apartment was immaculate and filled with the sense of home cooking. Traditional Lebanese dishes covered the dining table: stuffed grape leaves, kibbeh, tabbouleh, and fresh bread. Saida had clearly spent the entire day preparing a feast. This is incredible, Rashid said sincerely as they sat down to eat. I haven't had a home-cooked meal like this in years. A man should have someone to cook for him properly, Saida said, shooting a meaningful look at Noor. Hotels and restaurants are no substitute for family. Over dinner, Saida regaled them with stories of her youth in Beirut, her immigration to Dubai, and her late husband's work in the construction industry. Rashid listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions and sharing his own family history. My grandfather was also in construction, he told Saida. He taught me that buildings are more than just stone and steel, their dreams made solid. A romantic, Saida said approvingly. I like that in a man. As the evening progressed, Noor watched in amazement as her protective grandmother, completely charmed by Rashid's genuine interest in her stories and respectful attention to her opinions. When Saida mentioned her upcoming surgery, Rashid asked detailed questions about her care plan and offered additional support without making her feel like a charity case. The doctor you sent is very good, Saida told him over tea and dates. But expensive, I imagine. The best care for the grandmother of someone important to me isn't expensive, Rashid replied. It's necessary. And how important is my granddaughter to you? Saida asked with characteristic directness. Noor nearly choked on her tea. Tata, you can't just ask him that. Why not? If he's serious about you, he should be able to answer. If he's not serious, I need to know so I can warn you properly. Rashid set down his teacup and looked directly at Saida. Your granddaughter saved my life and then she changed it. She's intelligent, brave, and kind in ways that constantly amaze me. I hope to spend much more time discovering all the ways she might continue to change my life for the better. The room fell silent. Noor felt her cheeks burning as she stared at her hands in her lap. Good answer, Saida said finally. Now, what are your intentions toward her? To court her properly with respect for her values and your approval, Rashid said without hesitation. To support her ambitions and dreams, whatever they might be. And to hope that someday she might feel about me the way I'm beginning to feel about her. And how do you feel about her? Rashid's eyes found Noor's across the small table. Like I've been waiting my whole life for someone I didn't know existed. The admission hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable and completely unexpected. Noor felt tears prick her eyes as the full weight of his words settled in her heart. Then you have my blessing to try, Saida said simply. But if you hurt her, I know people in this neighborhood who will make your life very unpleasant. Rashid laughed, but his expression remained serious. I would expect nothing less from someone who raised a woman like Noor. Later, as they walked back through the old city streets toward Rashid's car, Noor tried to process everything that had happened over dinner. I can't believe you told my grandmother you wanted to court me, she said finally. I can't believe I told her I've been waiting my whole life for you, Rashid replied. But both things are true. They stopped under a street light, the sounds of the city fading around them. Noor looked up at Rashid's face, seeing vulnerability beneath his usual confidence. This is crazy, she whispered. We've known each other for a week. Sometimes a week is long enough to recognize something important, Rashid said softly. Sometimes it takes 30 seconds in an elevator. What happens now? Now we take it one day at a time. We keep working together, keep learning about each other, and see where this leads us. As they stood in the warm Dubai night, surrounded by the gentle chaos of a city that never truly slept, Noor made another choice that would change her life. She reached for Rashid's hand and intertwined their fingers. One day at a time, she agreed. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain but full of possibilities. And for the first time since she had thrown herself between those elevator doors, Noor felt like she was exactly where she belonged. 2 weeks after Hassan's departure from Dubai, Noor had settled into a routine that felt almost normal. She spent mornings at Rashid's compound working on business projects, afternoons visiting her grandmother who was recovering well from her surgery, and evenings exploring the city with Rashid as their relationship slowly deepened. It was a perfect Tuesday morning when everything changed. Noor was leaving her grandmother's apartment building, her arms full of leftover Lebanese food that Saida insisted she take back to feed that skinny businessman properly, when she noticed the black sedan parked across the street. The same car had been there yesterday morning and the day before that. She quickened her pace toward the main road where Rashid's driver waited, but the sedan's engine started as soon as she began walking. Her heart rate spiked as the car pulled into traffic behind her. Noor reached for her phone to call Rashid, but before she could dial, 2 men stepped out of an alley directly in front of her. They were dressed in casual clothes but moved with the purposeful coordination of professionals. "Miss Khalil," the taller man said in accented English. "Please come with us. Someone wants to speak with you." "I don't think so," Noor replied, backing away while scanning for escape routes. The street was busy with morning traffic, but the pedestrian areas were relatively empty. "It wasn't a request," the second man said, revealing a small knife tucked into his jacket. "Our employer has questions about your relationship with Emir Rashid." Awesome. Somehow, even from Switzerland he was still orchestrating attacks. Noor's mind raced through her options. She could scream for help, but the men would likely disappear before anyone could respond. She could run, but they had positioned themselves to cut off her path to the main road. She could comply and hope that Rashid's security team would track her location. Before she could decide, the distinctive sound of motorcycle engines filled the street. 3 black bikes rounded the corner at high speed, their riders wearing the discreet earpieces that marked them as Rashid's security team. The men who had cornered Noor immediately realized they were outnumbered. They melted back into the crowd with practiced ease, but not before the taller one leaned close enough to whisper, "This isn't over. Hassan al-Maktoum doesn't forget." Within minutes, Noor was surrounded by Rashid's security team and whisked away to a safe location. By the time Rashid arrived, she was sitting in the back room of a restaurant owned by one of his business partners, drinking strong coffee and trying to stop her hands from shaking. "Are you hurt?" Rashid asked immediately, checking her for injuries with gentle hands. "I'm fine," Noor said, though her voice betrayed her fear. "They didn't touch me. Your security team arrived just in time." "This is my fault," Rashid said grimly. "I should have known Hassan wouldn't give up just because he left the country. How did he even know where to find me? Hassan has resources and contacts throughout the region. If he wanted to track your movements, he could have done it from anywhere." Rashid's jaw tightened with anger. "But threatening you crosses a line that I won't tolerate." The head of security, a quiet man named Khalid, approached their table with a tablet displaying surveillance footage. "We've identified the vehicles and tracked their movements. They had your grandmother's building under surveillance for at least 3 days." Noor's blood turned cold. "My grandmother, is she safe?" "She's fine," Khalid assured her. "We've had a discreet security presence in her building since the hotel incident. But this confirms that Hassan is targeting anyone close to Mr. Rashid." "What does this mean?" Noor asked, looking between Rashid and his security chief. "It means you're moving to the compound permanently," Rashid said in a tone that brooked no argument. "And it means we're going to end Hassan's campaign once and for all." "How?" "By giving him what he wants," Rashid replied. "A face-to-face confrontation." Khalid frowned. "Sir, with respect, that's exactly what Hassan is hoping for. He wants to draw you into a situation where he has the advantage." "Then we make sure the advantage remains ours," Rashid said. "Hassan is operating from a position of desperation now. He's made himself a fugitive and alienated most of his legitimate business contacts. That makes him dangerous but also predictable." Noor listened to their tactical discussion with growing unease. The attempt to kidnap her had shifted the entire dynamic of their situation. What had started as a business rivalry had become a personal war, and she was no longer just a witness, she was a target. "I want to call my grandmother," she said suddenly. "Of course," Rashid replied immediately. "Khalid, can you arrange secure transportation to bring Mrs. Khalil to the compound as well?" "Already in progress, sir." 2 hours later, Nur was helping her grandmother settle into a guest suite at Rashid's estate. Saida took the luxury accommodations in stride, more concerned about the security implications than the marble bathrooms and silk curtains. "This Hassan man," she said as Nur unpacked her medications. "He's the one who tried to burn down the hotel?" "Yes, Taida. And now he's trying to use me to get to Rashid." Saida nodded thoughtfully. "In Lebanon we had men like this during the war. Men who let hatred consume their judgment. They always make the same mistake." "What mistake?" "They underestimate the power of people who choose to protect each other instead of destroying each other." That evening Rashid found Nur on the terrace overlooking the desert. She had been staring at the sunset, lost in thought about how quickly her life kept changing direction. "How are you feeling?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Like I'm in a movie that I never auditioned for," Nur replied honestly. 3 weeks ago, I was worried about paying my grandmother's medical bills. Now I'm hiding in a billionaire's compound because an international fugitive wants to kidnap me. Do you regret warning me about the fire?" Nur considered the question seriously. "No. I regret that helping you put my grandmother in danger, but I don't regret the choice itself." "What about us?" Rashid asked quietly. "Do you regret letting this develop between us?" "That's a harder question." Nur turned to face him, studying his profile in the fading light. "I care about you, Rashid. More than I expected to, more than is probably wise. But I'm scared that I'm falling for someone whose life will always involve this level of danger." "It won't," Rashid said firmly. "Hassan is an anomaly, a man driven by grief and rage beyond reason. Most of my business dealings are completely mundane." "Most?" "Well, there are always risks in international development. Political instability, economic fluctuations, cultural misunderstandings. But nothing like this." Nur reached for his hand, needing the comfort of physical connection. "What happens if Hassan escalates further? What if he decides that hurting me is the best way to hurt you?" "That's not going to happen," Rashid said with quiet intensity. "I won't let anyone harm you, Nur. I promise you that. You can't control everything though. Hassan proved that today." "No, but I can make sure he understands the consequences of targeting you." Rashid brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Hassan thinks he's fighting a business rival. He doesn't understand that he's now threatening someone I love." The word hung between them, spoken casually but loaded with meaning. Nur felt her breath catch as the full implication settled in. "Love?" she whispered. Rashid's eyes widened slightly, as if he hadn't intended to say it so directly. "Yes," he said simply. "I love you, Nur. I know it's too soon and too complicated and probably terrible timing given everything that's happening. But it's true." Tears pricked Nur's eyes as her heart swelled with joy and terror in equal measure. "I love you too," she admitted. "Which is why I'm so scared of what Hassan might do next." Rashid pulled her from her chair into his lap, wrapping his arms around her as the desert stars began to appear overhead. "Then we'll face whatever comes next together," he murmured against her hair. "Hassan made a critical error today." "What error?" "He showed me exactly how much I have to lose," Rashid said softly. "And that makes me infinitely more dangerous than he realizes." As they sat together under the vast Arabian sky, Nur felt the certainty of her feelings crystallize despite the uncertainty of their circumstances. Whatever happened with Hassan al-Maktoum, whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew with absolute conviction that she wanted to face them with Rashid. Love had found them in the most unlikely circumstances. Now they would discover whether it was strong enough to survive what came next. In the distance, Khalid spoke quietly into his radio, coordinating security rotations and monitoring communications. The compound was a fortress, but both Nur and Rashid knew that Hassan's next move would test every defense they had built. The question was no longer if Hassan would strike again but when and how, and whether they would be ready for him when he did. The attack came at dawn 3 days later, not with violence but with something far more insidious: doubt. Nur woke to find an envelope that had been slipped under her bedroom door during the night. Inside was a single photograph and a handwritten note in Arabic. The photograph showed her walking with Rashid through the hotel lobby on the night of the fire, timestamped just hours before the arson attempt. The note was brief but chilling. He knew. Ask him why he was leaving Dubai that night. Ask him why his luggage was already packed. A friend who cares about your safety. Noor stared at the photograph with growing confusion. The timestamp showed them together at 9:47 p.m., but she remembered clearly that Rashid had been surprised to see her in the elevator. He had been carrying his phone and a briefcase, not luggage. But doubt, once planted, began to grow. She found Rashid in his office, already dressed and reviewing documents for a video conference with investors in London. He looked up when she entered, his face lighting up with the warm smile that had become so precious to her. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, rising to greet her with a gentle kiss. "You're up early." "We need to talk," Noor said, holding up the envelope. "Someone left this for me." Rashid's expression shifted to concern as he examined the photograph and read the note. His jaw tightened with anger, but Noor noticed something else in his eyes, something that might have been guilt. "Hassan is trying to manipulate you," Rashid said finally. "This is exactly the kind of psychological warfare he specializes in." "The photograph is real though," Noor said carefully. "The timestamp shows us together hours before I warned you about the fire. Yes, we were both in the hotel that evening. I had dinner with potential investors before the final contract negotiations. But you were leaving Dubai that night?" Rashid was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Noor, you have to understand. Just answer the question, please. Were you planning to leave Dubai that night?" "Yes," Rashid admitted. "After the contract negotiations failed, I decided there was no point in staying. I had my assistant book a flight for the next morning." "But you went up to your suite anyway? Even though you were leaving?" "I needed to pack and make some calls." Rashid moved closer to her, his dark eyes intense. "Noor, what are you really asking me?" "I'm asking if you knew about the fire before I warned you." The accusation hung between them like a chasm. Rashid's face went pale, then flushed with anger. "You think I set up my own assassination attempt?" he asked incredulously. "You think I burned down a hotel suite and put dozens of people at risk for what insurance money? Publicity? I don't know what to think," Noor said honestly. "The timing is suspicious, and Hassan seems very confident that you're not who you appear to be." "Hassan is a man consumed by hatred who will say anything to destroy me," Rashid replied firmly. "Including manipulating the woman I love into doubting my character." "Then explain why your luggage was packed before the fire." "What luggage?" "I had a briefcase with business documents and my laptop. Everything else was still in my suite when it burned." Noor studied his face, searching for signs of deception. But Rashid had always been difficult to read during business negotiations. It was one of his strengths as an international developer. "I want to believe you," she said softly. "But you don't." "I want to, but Hassan's message raises questions that I can't ignore." Rashid turned away from her, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "What would convince you? What evidence would prove that I'm telling the truth?" "I don't know. Maybe if I understood more about your history with Hassan, about the business deal that went wrong. I told you about Tariq's embezzlement and his death. You told me Hassan's version of events. But what if there's more to the story?" Rashid was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at his gardens. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with old pain. "There is more," he admitted. "But it doesn't change the fundamental facts." "Tell me." Rashid returned to his desk and opened a locked drawer, retrieving a folder thick with documents. "These are the financial records from the construction company Hassan and I ran together. The evidence of Tariq's embezzlement, the client complaints, the missing deposits." Noor examined the papers carefully. Her language skills helped her understand the Arabic financial terms, and the pattern of theft was clear and extensive. "Tariq stole nearly $3 million over 6 months, Rashid continued. "When Hassan and I confronted him, he broke down completely. He begged us not to involve the police, promised he would pay everything back. But he didn't have the money? He had gambling debts. The money was gone and he owed even more to some very dangerous people." Rashid's expression darkened. "That's when Hassan came to me with a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "He wanted me to use my personal assets to cover Tariq's debts, both the money he stole and what he owed to the gambling syndicates. In exchange, Hassan would sign over his share of our company to me." Noor looked up from the documents. "You would have owned the entire business? And absorbed all the liability for Tariq's crimes," Rashid said. "Hassan was essentially asking me to sacrifice my financial future to save his brother's life." "What did you tell him?" "I said I needed time to think about it. The amount was enormous, enough to bankrupt me if the business failed. But I also knew that if we didn't pay the gambling syndicates, they would kill Tariq." "So what happened?" Rashid sat heavily in his chair, the weight of memory evident in his posture. Before I could give Hassan my answer, Tariq drove his car off that cliff. The police investigation showed alcohol and drugs in his system, along with evidence that he'd been beaten recently, probably by the people he owed money to. Hassan blamed you for not agreeing to the deal immediately? Hassan blamed me for everything. For discovering the theft, for considering involving the police, for not instantly agreeing to bankrupt myself to save Tariq. In his grief, he convinced himself that I could have prevented his brother's death if I had been more generous or more loyal. Nur absorbed this information, trying to reconcile it with Hassan's claims about Rashid's character. What about the clients whose money was stolen? I paid them back anyway, Rashid said quietly. Every dollar Tariq had taken, plus interest and compensation for the delays in their projects. It took me 3 years to recover financially. Even though you weren't legally obligated to do so? Even though Hassan never acknowledged the sacrifice or thanked me for protecting our clients. Rashid's voice carried deep hurt. Instead, he spent the next 8 years trying to destroy everything I built. Nur set down the financial documents, her mind spinning with the implications. If Rashid was telling the truth, then Hassan's vendetta was based on misplaced grief and unreasonable expectations. But if Hassan was right about Rashid's character? I need some time to think, she said finally. How much time? I don't know. Maybe I should go stay with my grandmother for a few days, get some perspective away from all this. Absolutely not, Rashid said firmly. Hassan's people are still out there, and you're not safe outside this compound. Then I'm trapped here until I decide whether to trust you or suspect you? You're protected here until we resolve this situation with Hassan once and for all. The distinction felt important, but Nur wasn't sure she understood the difference anymore. Was Rashid genuinely concerned for her safety, or was he trying to control the narrative by controlling her access to information? I'm going to spend the day with my grandmother, she said, standing to leave. Your security team can accompany me if necessary, but I need space to think clearly. Nur, wait. Rashid caught her hand as she passed his desk. I understand why Hassan's message has shaken your trust. But please remember that everything between us started with you saving my life. If I were capable of the kind of deception Hassan is suggesting, would I have needed your help that night? It was a good point, but Nur's emotional confusion made it difficult to think logically. Maybe that's exactly what you're counting on me to believe, she said softly. The hurt that flashed across Rashid's face was so genuine that it made her chest ache. But doubt, once seated, was difficult to uproot. I love you, Rashid said simply. Whatever else you question, please don't question that. I love you too, Nur replied. But love doesn't always make the truth clearer. Sometimes it makes everything more complicated. As she left his office, Nur felt the weight of an impossible choice. Either the man she loved was exactly who he appeared to be, honorable, generous, and worthy of her trust, or he was a master manipulator who had orchestrated their entire relationship. The thought that she might have fallen in love with an illusion terrified her more than any threat from Hassan al-Maktoum ever could. But as she spent the day listening to her grandmother's stories and seeking wisdom in familiar rituals of tea and conversation, Nur began to realize that the answer lay not in the accusations and evidence swirling around them. It lay in her own heart, and in the choice between fear and faith that every love story ultimately demanded. Hassan's second message arrived that evening while Nur was having dinner with her grandmother in the compound's guest quarters. This time it came as a phone call to her personal number, a number that should have been secure and private. Miss Khalil, the familiar voice said when she answered. I hope you've had time to consider the photograph I sent. Nur's blood turned cold. She gestured frantically to her grandmother, who immediately understood and moved to alert Rashid's security team. What do you want, Hassan? Nur asked, trying to keep her voice steady. To save you from a very dangerous man, Hassan replied smoothly. Amir Rashid has convinced you that I'm the villain in this story, but the truth is much more complicated. I've heard your version of events. Have you? Or have you only heard what Rashid wanted you to know? Hassan's voice carried the practiced charm of a skilled manipulator. Tell me, did he mention that my brother Tariq tried to call me the night he died? That he was terrified of something Rashid had threatened to do? Nur's heart sank. This was exactly the kind of detail that could be either crucial evidence or complete fabrication. What kind of threat? Tariq told me that Rashid had given him an ultimatum: pay back the stolen money within 24 hours, or Rashid would turn him over to the gambling syndicates himself. That's not what Rashid told me. Of course it isn't. Rashid is very good at presenting himself as the reasonable, generous partner. But my brother died terrified and alone because of Rashid's ultimatum. Nur closed her eyes, trying to think clearly despite the emotional manipulation she could hear in Hassan's voice. Even if that were true, it doesn't justify attempted murder. Doesn't it? Hassan's voice hardened. Rashid destroyed my family and then spent years building his fortune on projects that should have been ours. He's a thief and a liar, Miss Khalil. And now he's using you to legitimize his business dealings. What do you mean? Your translation services, your cultural expertise, they're not just helpful for his international negotiations. They're essential for the money laundering operation he's been running through construction projects in Lebanon and Syria. The accusation hit Nur like a physical blow. Money laundering would explain Rashid's rapid success and his need for an Arabic-speaking partner who could navigate Middle Eastern business culture. You're lying, she said, but doubt crept into her voice. Am I? Check his financial records for the Damascus hotel project. Look at the invoicing patterns for the Beirut residential development. Ask yourself why he needs so many cash transactions in Lebanese pounds. Before Nur could respond, Hassan continued. I have evidence of everything, Miss Khalil. Documents that prove Rashid has been using his legitimate businesses to clean money for criminal organizations. But I need someone close to him to help me gather the final pieces. You want me to spy on him? I want you to save yourself before you become an unwitting accomplice to his crimes. The line went dead, leaving Nur staring at her phone in shock. Within minutes, Khalid and 2 other security personnel had traced the call and confirmed what they all suspected: Hassan was still operating from Switzerland, but he had resources and contacts throughout the Middle East. When Rashid arrived at the guest quarters, his face was grim with concern. What exactly did he say? Nur repeated Hassan's accusations about Tariq's final phone call and the alleged money laundering operation. With each detail, she watched Rashid's expression grow darker. He's escalating his psychological warfare, Rashid said finally. Everything he told you is either a complete lie or a twisted version of the truth. But what if it isn't? Nur asked quietly. What if there are things about your business that I don't understand? Rashid studied her face for a long moment, then made a decision that would change everything between them. Come with me, he said. It's time you saw everything. He led her through the compound to a section she had never visited before, a secure office complex with reinforced doors and sophisticated security systems. Inside, banks of computers displayed real-time financial data from construction projects across the Middle East. This is my actual business, Rashid said, gesturing to the screens. Every transaction, every contract, every payment, all of it tracked and documented according to international banking regulations. Nur examined the financial displays, noting the transparency and detailed record-keeping. Hassan mentioned projects in Damascus and Beirut specifically. The Damascus hotel was cancelled 2 years ago when the political situation deteriorated, Rashid explained, pulling up relevant files. The Beirut project is a low-income housing development that I'm funding through a non-profit foundation. What about the cash transactions Hassan mentioned? Construction workers in Lebanon are often paid in cash because many don't have bank accounts, Rashid said patiently. It's a cultural and economic reality, not evidence of money laundering. As Nur reviewed the documentation, she realized that Hassan had taken legitimate business practices and twisted them into something sinister. The pattern was clever and manipulative, mixing just enough truth with speculation to create doubt. Why didn't you show me this before? She asked. Because I hoped you would trust me without needing proof, Rashid replied honestly. But I understand why Hassan's accusations have shaken your confidence. What about Tariq's phone call the night he died? Rashid's expression grew pained. Tariq did call Hassan that night. But it wasn't to report threats from me, it was to beg Hassan to help him disappear before the gambling syndicates found him. How do you know that? Because Hassan played me a recording of the call 6 months later, when he was trying to convince investors that I was responsible for Tariq's death. Rashid opened another secure file on his computer. I had my lawyers obtain a copy during the subsequent legal proceedings. He played the audio file, and Nur listened to a young man's voice, slurred with alcohol and terror, begging his brother for money to flee the country. There was no mention of threats from Rashid, only desperate fear of the people Tariq owed money to. Hassan edited this recording when he shared it with you, Nur realized. Hassan has been editing the truth for 8 years, Rashid said grimly. But now he's involving you directly, which means his desperation is reaching dangerous levels. What do you think he wants me to do? Probably to plant surveillance devices in my offices or steal financial documents that he can manipulate as evidence against me. As if summoned by their conversation, Noor's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The listening device is in the package being delivered to your grandmother's apartment tomorrow. Planted in Rashid's private office. $500,000 will be deposited in your account when I have proof of his criminal activities. Noor showed the message to Rashid, whose face darkened with anger. He's not just trying to frame me anymore, he's trying to make you an active participant in his scheme. What should I do? We're going to give him exactly what he wants, Rashid said with a cold smile. But on our terms. What do you mean? Hassan expects you to be conflicted and uncertain. He's counting on your emotional confusion to make you vulnerable to his manipulation. Rashid turned from the computer screens to face her directly. But what if we turn that expectation against him? You want me to pretend to help him? I want us to work together to gather evidence of his criminal conspiracy. Hassan just offered you $500,000 to commit corporate espionage. That's a serious felony. Noor felt a mix of excitement and terror at the prospect. It would be dangerous. Extremely dangerous, Rashid agreed. Which is why I'll understand completely if you refuse. You've already done more than enough to help me. What would we need to do? Accept his offer, take the listening device, and arrange a meeting where he reveals his full plan. My security team would monitor everything, and Detective Hassan would have the evidence she needs to issue an international arrest warrant. Noor considered the proposal carefully. It would require her to lie convincingly to a dangerous man while trusting completely in Rashid's protection. But it would also end Hassan's campaign of terror once and for all. If I do this, she said slowly, I need to know that you'll be honest with me about everything from now on. No more protective secrets, no more edited versions of the truth. I promise you complete transparency, Rashid said solemnly. About my business, my past, and my feelings for you. And if something goes wrong? If Hassan realizes it's a trap? Then we'll face the consequences together. Rashid took her hands in his dark eyes intense. But I believe we can end this, Noor. I believe we can build a future without Hassan's shadow hanging over us. Noor looked into the face of the man she loved, weighing trust against doubt, courage against caution. In the end, the choice came down to a simple question. Did she believe in their partnership enough to risk everything for the chance at a peaceful future? Let's do it, she said finally. Let's end this. As they began planning their counter-operation against Hassan al-Maktoum, Noor felt the same mixture of fear and determination that had driven her to warn Rashid about the hotel fire. Once again she was choosing to act despite the risks, to trust in something bigger than her own safety. But this time she wasn't acting alone. This time she had a partner who valued her courage and trusted her judgment. Together they would face Hassan's final gambit and discover whether their love was strong enough to survive the test of fire. The listening device arrived the next morning, concealed inside a package of specialty Lebanese tea that was delivered to Saida's apartment. It was sophisticated technology, a tiny transmitter that could be hidden virtually anywhere and would broadcast conversations to a secure frequency. Noor examined the device in Rashid's secure office while Detective Hassan and Khalid observed. The plan they had developed was elegant in its simplicity. Noor would appear to plant the device in Rashid's office, but it would actually be connected to a recording system controlled by Dubai police. Hassan will expect to hear business conversations that could be interpreted as criminal activity, Detective Hassan explained. We'll provide scripted dialogues that will encourage him to reveal his own illegal activities. What if he becomes suspicious? Noor asked. The beauty of this device is that it picks up everything within a 30-foot radius, Khalid replied. Hassan will hear normal office sounds, phone calls, meetings, all the ambient noise that would prove the device is actually in Rashid's office. How long before he contacts me again? Probably within 24 hours of device activation, Detective Hassan said. Hassan is impatient and arrogant, qualities that work in our favor. That afternoon, Noor sent Hassan a coded text message confirming that the device had been installed. The response came within hours. Excellent. Monitor the frequency tonight. Tomorrow we meet to discuss your compensation. The proposed meeting location was a public cafe in Old Dubai, not far from her grandmother's apartment building. Hassan was clearly choosing familiar territory where he felt confident and in control. He's trying to make you feel comfortable by suggesting a location near your home, Rashid observed as they reviewed the operational plan. But it also means he has escape routes planned and possibly backup personnel positioned throughout the area. What's my objective during the meeting? Get him to explain his full plan for destroying my business, Detective Hassan instructed. We need him to detail the criminal conspiracy, including any other people involved and evidence of his previous attacks. What if he asks me for specific information from the listening device? We'll provide you with believable details about fictional business conversations, Rashid said. Nothing that could actually damage my reputation, but enough to convince Hassan that he's getting valuable intelligence. As the sun set over Dubai, Noor prepared for what would likely be the most dangerous conversation of her life. She dressed conservatively in dark colors that would help her blend into crowds, and carried a small purse containing a recording device provided by the police. Remember, Rashid said as they reviewed the final details, Hassan is intelligent and manipulative, but he's also desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. What's my exit strategy if things go wrong? Khalid and his team will be positioned throughout the cafe and surrounding streets. If you feel threatened, mention the weather and they'll intervene immediately. The same signal we planned for our original meeting with Hassan? Exactly. Simple, memorable, and unlikely to come up in normal conversation. Noor nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. What happens after tonight? Assuming everything goes according to plan? Hassan will be arrested and charged with conspiracy, attempted murder, and international extortion, Detective Hassan replied. The evidence we gather tonight should be sufficient for conviction. And then? Then you and Rashid can finally build the life you want without looking over your shoulders, Khalid said with a rare smile. The cafe Hassan had chosen was busy with evening customers when Noor arrived. She ordered mint tea and took a table near the window, positioning herself so that she could see the street while remaining visible to Rashid's security team. Hassan appeared exactly on time, looking remarkably unremarkable in casual clothing and sunglasses. If Noor hadn't known who he was, she would have mistaken him for any other businessman meeting a colleague for coffee. Miss Khalil, he said warmly, taking the seat across from her. Thank you for being so cooperative. I know this situation must be difficult for you. I just want the truth, Noor replied, following the script they had practiced. If Rashid is really involved in criminal activities, I need to know. The listening device is working perfectly, Hassan said with satisfaction. I've already heard several interesting conversations about cash transfers and offshore accounts. Noor's heart raced, but she maintained her expression of concerned curiosity. What kind of conversations? Rashid has been moving large amounts of money through Lebanese banks without proper documentation. The kind of financial activity that regulatory authorities would find very interesting. You said you had evidence of other criminal activities? Hassan leaned forward conspiratorially. The hotel fire was just the beginning, Miss Khalil. I've been documenting Rashid's illegal activities for years, waiting for the right moment to expose him. What other activities? Bribery of government officials in 3 different countries. Tax evasion through fraudulent construction contracts. And conspiracy to defraud investors by inflating property values. Noor felt sick listening to Hassan's elaborate web of lies. Each accusation was designed to sound plausible while being impossible to quickly verify or disprove. Why are you telling me all this? She asked. Because I need a witness who can testify about Rashid's character and business practices, Hassan replied. Someone who has been close enough to observe his true nature. You want me to testify against him in court? I want you to help me ensure that justice is served. Rashid has hurt too many people and destroyed too many lives. It's time for him to face consequences. Hassan pulled out a tablet and showed her what appeared to be financial documents and photographs of business meetings. This is just a sample of the evidence I've collected. With your testimony about his current activities, we can build an unshakable case. What happens to me if I help you? You'll be protected and compensated for your courage in speaking out against corruption. The international authorities take these kinds of financial crimes very seriously. And if I refuse? Hassan's expression hardened slightly. Then you become an accessory to Rashid's crimes. The authorities will have to decide whether you were an innocent victim or a willing participant. The threat was clear but subtly delivered. Hassan was offering her a choice between betraying Rashid and facing potential criminal charges herself. I need time to think about this, Noor said carefully. Of course. But time is limited, Miss Khalil. The longer Rashid continues his criminal activities, the more difficult it becomes to separate his associates from his accomplices. Hassan stood to leave, but paused to place a hand on her shoulder. You seem like an intelligent woman who understands the difference between right and wrong. I hope you'll make the choice that protects your future. After he left, Noor remained at the cafe for another 20 minutes, following the operational protocol. Her hands shook slightly as she sipped her tea, adrenaline finally catching up with her now that the immediate danger had passed. Khalid appeared at her table as if by coincidence, sitting down with his own coffee. "How did it go?" he asked quietly. "He took the bait completely," Noor replied. "But listening to him weave such elaborate lies about Rashid made me realize something important." "What's that?" "Hassan isn't just seeking revenge anymore. He genuinely believes his own fabrications about Rashid's character. He's convinced himself that he's the righteous one in this conflict. That makes him more dangerous but also more predictable," Khalid observed. "Self-righteousness leads to overconfidence." When Noor returned to the compound, she found Rashid and Detective Hassan reviewing audio recordings from their surveillance of the meeting. Hassan's voice came through clearly as he detailed his accusations and threats. "This is more than enough for an arrest warrant," Detective Hassan said with satisfaction. "Hassan has confessed to conspiracy, extortion, and making false accusations to international authorities." "When will you move against him?" Rashid asked. "Tomorrow morning. Swiss authorities have agreed to cooperate with the arrest, and we have enough evidence to request immediate extradition." Noor sank into a chair, emotionally exhausted by the evening's performance. "Is it really over?" "Hassan's part of it is over," Detective Hassan confirmed. "By tomorrow evening he'll be in custody and facing serious criminal charges." "What about us?" Noor asked, looking at Rashid. "What happens to us now?" Rashid moved to her side, taking her hands in his warm grasp. "Now we find out what we're like when we're not running from danger or questioning each other's motives. Are you ready for that?" "I've been ready since the night you threw yourself between those elevator doors," Rashid said softly. "The question is whether you're ready to trust completely in what we've built together." Noor looked into his dark eyes and saw not just love but absolute honesty. The doubts that Hassan had planted over the past weeks had been burned away by the reality of their partnership during the sting operation. "I'm ready," she said simply. As they held each other in the secure office surrounded by the evidence of Hassan's defeat, Noor realized that their relationship had survived its ultimate test. They had faced deception, manipulation, and mortal danger together, and their trust in each other had only grown stronger. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight was about celebrating the victory they had achieved through courage, intelligence, and unwavering partnership. The future stretched ahead of them, bright with possibilities that no enemy could diminish or destroy. Hassan al-Maktoum's arrest in Geneva made international headlines the next morning. Swiss police, acting on an international warrant issued by Dubai authorities, had detained him at his luxury hotel as he prepared to board a private jet to Monaco. Noor read the news reports over breakfast on the terrace, still finding it difficult to believe that the threat which had dominated their lives for weeks was finally neutralized. "The extradition proceedings should take about 2 weeks, Detective Hassan reported during her final briefing with Rashid and Noor. "Hassan's lawyers will fight it, but the evidence is overwhelming." "What happens if he somehow avoids extradition?" Noor asked. "He won't," the detective said confidently. The Swiss authorities found additional evidence in his hotel room, detailed plans for future attacks against Mr. Rashid's business interests and associates. "Hassan has made himself an international criminal." After the detective left, Rashid and Noor walked through his gardens in comfortable silence. The desert morning was crisp and clear, with the promise of warmth later in the day. "How are you feeling?" Rashid asked as they paused beside the fountain at the center of the garden maze. "Free," Noor replied honestly. "For the first time since that night in the elevator, I feel like I can think about the future without worrying about what Hassan might do next." "What do you see when you think about that future?" Noor turned to face him, studying the man who had become so central to her world. "I see partnership. In business and in life. I see travel to interesting places and work that challenges me. I see my grandmother spoiling our children someday." "Our children?" Rashid smiled at the casual way she had included that detail. "Eventually. If you want them too. I want everything with you, Noor. Children, adventure, quiet moments like this one. I want to build something beautiful and lasting together. Even though I'm not from your world of wealth and international business?" "Especially because you're not from that world," Rashid said seriously. "You've shown me what really matters: courage, loyalty, kindness to people who can't offer you anything in return. Those qualities are worth more than any fortune." Noor felt tears of happiness prick her eyes. "So what happens now? Do we just go back to working together and pretend the past month of chaos never happened?" "Actually, I have a different proposal," Rashid said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "I think it's time we made our partnership official in every possible way." Noor's breath caught as he withdrew a small velvet box and dropped to one knee beside the fountain. "Noor Khalil," he said, his voice gentle but steady, "you saved my life and then you transformed it completely. You've been my partner in danger and in triumph, my translator and my teacher, my friend and my love. Will you marry me?" The ring inside the box was stunning but understated, a classic solitaire diamond set in platinum, elegant and timeless rather than ostentatious. "Yes," Noor whispered, then louder, "Yes, of course, yes." Rashid slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly with emotion. When he stood to kiss her, Noor felt the rightness of the moment settle into her bones like certainty made solid. "When?" she asked against his lips. "Whenever you want. Tomorrow, next month, next year, I'm not going anywhere." "Soon?" Noor decided. "I want to be your wife soon." They spent the rest of the morning making calls to share their news. Saida's reaction was typically direct. "It's about time. I was beginning to think you were both too stubborn to admit what was obvious to everyone else." Rashid's parents, calling from London where his father was receiving medical treatment, were warm and welcoming despite never having met Noor in person. "Anyone who could capture our son's heart so completely must be extraordinary," his mother said over video chat. "We can't wait to meet you properly." By afternoon, wedding plans were already taking shape. They decided on a ceremony at Rashid's desert estate in 6 weeks, with celebrations that would blend Lebanese and Emirati traditions. "Small and intimate," Noor insisted. "Just family and close friends." "Whatever makes you happy," Rashid agreed. "Though I should warn you that my definition of small might be different from yours." As the sun set over their engagement day, Noor and Rashid sat on his private terrace sharing dinner and dreams for their future together. The diamond on her finger caught the last light of evening, sparkling like a promise made manifest. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't heard those men planning the fire?" Noor asked. "I try not to think about that," Rashid replied. "But I believe we would have found each other somehow. Some connections are inevitable." "You really think fate brought us together?" "I think courage brought us together," Rashid said thoughtfully. "Your courage to warn a stranger, my courage to trust you completely, our courage to build something real despite all the obstacles." "What's our next adventure going to be?" "The Morocco hotel project is moving forward, and there's interest from investors in Egypt and Jordan. We could spend our honeymoon touring potential development sites." "A working honeymoon?" Noor laughed. "Only you would propose business travel as romantic. Working together is romantic when you love what you do and who you're doing it with." As they talked about projects and possibilities, Noor marveled at how naturally they had fallen into planning a shared future. There was no uncertainty, no hesitation, just the easy confidence of two people who had tested their partnership under extreme circumstances and found it unbreakable. "I love you," she said suddenly, the words bubbling up from pure happiness. "I love you too," Rashid replied, bringing her hand to his lips to kiss the engagement ring. "Always and completely." Later that night, as Noor lay in bed replaying the perfect day, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown international number. Her heart skipped a beat as she read it. "Congratulations on your engagement. Enjoy it while you can. A friend." The message could have been from anyone, Hassan's associates, someone else with a grudge against Rashid, or even a wrong number. But the timing felt too coincidental to ignore. Noor showed the message to Rashid, who immediately contacted Khalid to trace its origin. "It came from a prepaid phone in Monaco," Khalid reported within an hour. "The same city Hassan was trying to reach when he was arrested." "Could Hassan have sent it before his arrest?" Noor asked. "Possible but unlikely. The timestamp shows it was sent 6 hours after Hassan was taken into custody." "Then someone else is continuing his campaign," Rashid concluded grimly. "We'll investigate thoroughly," Khalid promised. "But it could also be someone trying to capitalize on the situation for their own purposes." Despite the reassurances, Noor felt a chill of unease. Just when they thought their nightmare with Hassan was over, a new threat seemed to be emerging from the shadows. "We're not going to let this spoil our engagement," Rashid said firmly when they were alone again. "Whatever this is, we'll face it together like we faced Hassan." "Promise me something," Noor said, curling into his arms. "Anything. Promise me that no matter what happens, we won't let fear make our decisions for us. We fought too hard for our happiness to give it up now." "I promise," Rashid said, his voice strong with conviction. "No one will ever again have the power to threaten what we've built together." As they held each other in the darkness, both of them hoped that promise would be easier to keep than it sounded. The future they had planned together was worth fighting for, but they were about to discover that some enemies were more persistent than others. The mysterious message turned out to be nothing more than a cruel prank by one of Hassan's former business associates trying to cause psychological damage from a distance. Within days, Khalid's investigation had traced the source and confirmed that no real threat existed. Hassan himself remained in Swiss custody, his extradition appeals failing one by one as the evidence against him mounted. Detective Hassan reported that he would likely face trial in Dubai within 2 months, followed by a lengthy prison sentence. 6 weeks after their engagement, Noor and Rashid were married in a ceremony that perfectly blended their two cultures. The wedding took place at sunset in Rashid's desert gardens, with traditional Lebanese music mixing with Emirati customs as two families became one. Saida, resplendent in a gown chosen specifically for the occasion, walked Noor down the aisle since her father wasn't alive to perform the honor. "Your parents would be so proud," she whispered as they approached the altar where Rashid waited in traditional white robes. The ceremony was conducted in both Arabic and English, with readings from both the Quran and Lebanese poetry. When Rashid and Noor exchanged vows they had written themselves, there wasn't a dry eye among the 50 guests gathered to witness their union. "You saved my life in an elevator," Rashid said, his voice carrying clearly in the desert evening. "But you saved my soul in the days and weeks that followed. I promise to be worthy of your courage, your intelligence, and your love for all the days of our lives." "You showed me that home isn't a place," Noor replied, her eyes shining with happy tears. "It's the person who makes you feel safe enough to be completely yourself. I promise to be your home and your partner in every adventure life brings us." The celebration that followed lasted until dawn, with traditional dancing, elaborate feasts, and toasts in multiple languages. Rashid's business associates mixed easily with Noor's neighbors from old Dubai, united by the obvious joy of the couple they had come to celebrate. "This is what success really looks like," Rashid's father told Noor during their first dance as father and daughter-in-law. "Not buildings or bank accounts, but the love of a good woman and the respect of people who matter." Their honeymoon was indeed a working trip, but one that felt more like an extended adventure than business travel. They toured potential development sites in Morocco, Egypt, and Jordan, with Noor's language skills and cultural insights proving invaluable in negotiations with local partners. "We make a good team," Rashid observed as they closed a deal for a sustainable tourism project in Jordan's Wadi Rum desert. "The best team," Noor agreed, watching the sun set over the ancient landscape that would soon host their eco-friendly resort. 6 months after their wedding, they received news that Hassan al-Maktoum had been convicted on all charges and sentenced to 15 years in prison. The trial had revealed the full extent of his obsession with destroying Rashid, including evidence of at least 12 separate attempts over 8 years. "It's finally over," Detective Hassan told them during her final update. "Hassan will be eligible for parole in 10 years, but he'll be monitored for the rest of his life." "How do you feel?" Noor asked Rashid as they absorbed the news. "Sad," he replied honestly. "Hassan was my friend once, and seeing what hatred did to him over the years, it's tragic really." "Do you regret anything about how it all played out?" "Only that I couldn't find a way to help Hassan move past his grief before it consumed him completely." Rashid was quiet for a moment. "But I'm grateful every day that his hatred brought you into my life. Even though it put me in danger? Especially because you chose to face that danger with courage and love instead of fear and retreat." 1 year after their first meeting in the hotel elevator, Noor and Rashid stood on the balcony of their new home, a penthouse apartment in downtown Dubai that offered views of both the modern skyline and the old city where their story began. "Any regrets?" Rashid asked, echoing their conversation from their wedding night. "Only one," Noor replied, leaning into his embrace as they watched the city lights twinkle below them. "What's that?" "I regret that it took a madman's assassination attempt to bring us together," she said with a smile. "We could have saved ourselves a lot of stress if we just met at a normal business conference. But then we never would have known how strong we are together when everything goes wrong." "True. And we never would have had such an interesting story to tell our children." "Speaking of children," Rashid turned her in his arms, his expression suddenly serious. "How would you feel about starting to work on that part of our future?" Noor's heart leaped with joy. "I would feel like the luckiest woman in the world." As they kissed under the Arabian stars, surrounded by the city that had witnessed their love story unfold, Noor reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, she had been a simple hotel interpreter worried about her grandmother's medical bills. Tonight, she was a successful businesswoman, a beloved wife, and a partner in ventures that spanned multiple countries. But more than any of those achievements, she was a woman who had chosen courage over safety, trust over suspicion, and love over fear. Those choices had led her to a happiness she had never imagined possible. "Thank you," she whispered against Rashid's lips. "For what?" "For being worth the risk." "Thank you for taking it," he replied. As they planned their future together, the children they would raise, the businesses they would build, the love they would nurture, Noor knew with absolute certainty that their greatest adventures still lay ahead. The elevator that had brought them together had been going up, and they had never stopped rising. Dear amazing viewers, thank you for joining Noor and Rashid on their incredible journey from strangers to soulmates. Their story reminds us that love often finds us when we least expect it, and that the greatest rewards come to those brave enough to act when others might hesitate. What did you think of Noor's split-second decision to warn Rashid about the fire? Have you ever had a moment where you had to choose between safety and doing what's right? And which part of their romance touched your heart the most, their first meeting, their business partnership, or their wedding in the desert? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing from readers about which moments resonated most with them.